Welcome to Ruby Thursdays, Better Than Airbnb, Unit 2, Lesson 1, Registration with Devise. First up, you need to have your app set up just for basic development. You can sign up for my mailing list at this link to receive access to the Get Launching series and cheat sheet. I'm going to assume your app is set up in a similar fashion. Feel free to adjust whatever you need for your setup. At the time of this recording, we're using Ruby 2.2.3 and Rails 4.2.5. In this lesson, we're going to plow through a couple of user stories that set up the basis for our app. It's nothing crazy new, but hopefully you'll pick up a few tips. And of course, there are certain things that you sometimes forget when you're not launching from scratch all the time. First up is our user story. As a logged-in visitor, I want to see the home page so that I can see information about the site and join the site. It's just a natural place to start. Let's have a home page. Let's set up our home feature spec. The feature will be visiting the home page, and we'll see the company name. So we'll visit that route path and expect the page to have the text better than Airbnb. Open up the app in your text editor and you create a folder for features. Then we're going to create a new file for our home spec. And now we'll paste in that spec that we wrote. And now let's check it out. We always run it first to make sure that it's written correctly, and it should fail like we expect it to fail. So it runs, and yes, there's no route path. We haven't added a route path to our app. We'll add the home page with a home controller and view. So we'll create the home controller with an index method. Then we'll edit our routes to have a route path. And finally, we'll add that text to the index page, which is our home page. In the terminal, let's copy that command to create the controller. And it creates a couple of files, some other testing files we'll go over in just a moment. So now let's go into config and then routes, and then make the home index the root. Next, we will move into the views, so app, views, home, index. And let's get rid of this general text and put in our welcome to Better Than Airbnb. Now when we run our spec, it will pass. Now let's check out some of the other files that creating that controller made. So we have controllers, and it made a test for us, and that looks okay for now. We may add to that later. And it also added views because a view was created. So in home, views. So this would be pending, so let's go ahead and add a test for it. Right now it's testing the same thing as our feature test, but we'll be using this file later to test CSS and make sure the right style sheets are loading. So we're going to go ahead and fill this out now. Back in our text editor, let's fill in this spec that, again, just make sure we have the text better than Airbnb. We also see that it made a helpers folder. We're not using helpers yet, so I'm just going to comment this out. We may in the future, so I'm not going to delete the file quite yet. Back to the terminal, let's run all the specs to make sure that everything passes. We already have a couple going, so we have 3 examples and no failures. Let's go ahead and commit this. Let's make sure all the files look right, and they do. Let's add all the files with git add dot. Now I'm going to use just git commit to open a commit message in my editor. It's a little bit easier to copy paste. I'm going to add a simple message. This is a simple commit, so I'm going to add the home page. And then I'm going to add the number associated with our story in Pivotal Tracker to the commit message. This helps us track exactly what we're doing in each commit. And even if the commit wasn't the whole feature, I'd still reference it. So now we'll close it, and it's committed those changes. And of course, let's push to GitHub so it's nice and safe. So git push origin master. Now I can go back to Pivotal Tracker and I can accept the story and then say that I finished the story. If you were working with a team, these different statuses would mean different things. For now, I'm just going to click all the way through to done. I'm going to show this task just once as part of the course. Our next user story says, as a host, I can register for the site so that I can post a location. Hosts and guests are going to have different flows for when they actually sign up, but the model and the building blocks are going to be the same. Therefore, we're going to create a registration spec that right now just will have the scenario for host registers And soon we'll have guest registers as well. The feature, though, will be member registers for the site. Our first scenario will be host registers to visit the route path, click on the link Become a Host, and then they'll fill in the registration forms. Right now we're just testing registrations. We're just going to test to make sure that they get that welcome message, you have signed up successfully. I've broken out the fill in registration fields because we can use that again. So we'll fill in the registration fields with faker names, and then for the password, the Devise friendly token. Let's install this bad boy. So let's go to Features and add a new file. And we'll call this registrationspec.rb. And we'll paste in the spec and save. Now, of course, we need to run it, make sure that it fails in the way that we think it will. And it fails, and right, it can't find a link to become a host. In order to make that link work, we need to install Devise. We will add the gem to our gem file, and then bundle, and then run the generator to install Devise. Now we're going to create our member model using Devise. We'll rake DB migrate, and then finally add that link to become a host, which will go to the new member registration path. In our gem file, let's scroll on down to just above where our development gems are and add Devise and save. Now we'll bundle, and this happens pretty quickly. Just adds a couple of gems there, some dependencies. And now let's install Devise. And now we'll generate the Devise member. Great, let's go ahead and check out that migration file. I like to check it out just to make sure it's what we need, and it looks good. Now we will rake DB migrate, the first one in this app. Yay! Next up, we need to add that link to become a host to our home page. Now we'll run the spec again to see where we are. There is still a failure. Let's check it out. And it's missing the name field. In our spec, it had said we would also fill out a name, so we need to add the name now. To add the name, we'll add a name attribute to member by creating another migration file. Then we're going to need to generate the Devise views so that we can edit them. In most apps I've worked on, we've had custom Devise views, so we'll just go ahead and do that. Then we'll add the name field to the Devise registration's new view. Back in our terminal, let's generate that migration file. And then, I like to check it out just to make sure that, yes, members name string. Okay, then rake DB migrate to add the name to member. And that's done. Now we'll generate those Devise views, and it generates a whole bunch. We just need to go into Views, Devise, Registrations, New. We're just gonna use the basic HTML that we have here, copy and paste, replace email with name. That's gonna be the first field to fill out. Put name in both places. Now we need to be sure that name will be saved for our new member. We will need to tell Devise about the name. In our application controller, we'll add configure permitted parameters method that tells Devise what new parameters it should allow. We're also going to edit a view to match the spec. We're going to remove the password confirmation. We're just going to have folks enter their password once. Let's do that real quick while we're here, just taking out that extra field we don't need. Now let's go into the application controller and paste in that method that we need to tell Devise what we're going to be adding. Let's run our spec again to see where we are. And now we are missing a notification message. So we need to add that to our layout. I find it useful to add an unless statement when dealing with notices and alerts, because I've found that if you don't, then it may mess with your design. So I'm going to go ahead and say unless notice blank, let's show the notice. And unless the alert is blank, we'll show the alert. And we'll put that in our application layout. Here we are in our application layout and adding those notices and alerts. Let's see where we are. And it passes. That's great. So Devise has been installed correctly. Now let's run all of the tests that were included when we added our model. And we see that one spec has not been filled out. Let's take a look on how we can utilize that spec. It's helpful to go ahead and make sure that you have a valid factory because generally speaking, you are going to use these factories numerous times. Let's make sure that they stay up to date. Then let's go ahead and add a couple of basic validations, which should validate the presence of the name, the email, and the password. These are things that we need for the member. Now we'll edit the model's member spec to include all of the different tests that we want to include. And let's make it pretty and save. Now let's run just that spec to see if it passes. It fails, which is fine. We see first that we are not validating the presence of name in the model. Let's go ahead and scroll up to see that the factory needs an email and a password because those can't be blank. To fix up our member factory, we'll use Faker to create a name, an email address, then we'll use Devise to create the password. Next, in the member model file, we will validate the presence of name. Devise handles the validations for email and password for us. Now we'll move into our member factory and include what we need to make a member. Next up, let's go into models and then members and add validates presence of name. Running our spec again, we have now passed. Let's run all the specs again to see where we are. And drum roll, they're doing a couple specs and they all pass. Great. This is an excellent time to go ahead and commit our changes. So we have lots of things in our git status. Let's add all of those with git add dot. And now we'll create the commit. Go ahead and open that up so that I can write a bunch of stuff in here. Member can register for the site. And I'm going to include the pivotal tracker ID for that story. And we will save that. You can also add any other notes you think might be useful. So we'll save and it commits. Now let's push that to our master branch. That wraps up this lesson of Better Than Airbnb. In the next lesson, we'll set up the member's profile. If you are not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, go ahead and click that big red button right there. I am going to post an extra video this week from our Ruby Roundtable meetup that didn't quite fit in with the other video. If you are not already on my mailing list, head on over to rubythursday.com to sign up to get more Ruby Thursday awesomeness in your inbox. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below. Thanks again for watching and see you soon.